Thank you, Martin and Peter. And before we get into our panel, I'm just going to give a little detail into some Austrian-American sport relations. So looking at Austrian sports talent on the U.S. stage, I picked these three gentlemen because it's been a great summer for them. Jakob Poeltl, Bernhard Reimann, Sepp Straka. What kind of stands out for these guys is they're not in the traditionally strong Austrian sports. They're not in skiing, they're not in hockey. Rather, they're in basketball, they're in American football, and golf. And as you can see here, Jakob Poeltl and Bernhard Reimann in July of this year had a huge 4-year contract extension, over $100 million in those contracts. Sepp Straka also won a major at a Truist Championship, earning him $3.6 million, and was also selected to be in Team Europe for the Ryder Cup, which happened just recently in our backyard here in Bethpage. And we could go all day and talk about athlete contracts, but our focus here is sports business. So talking about Austrian companies in sports business, we can kind of classify into 3 categories here. There's the global icons, right? There's the Red Bulls, Doppelmayr, Atomic, Head, brands that are almost household names at this point. You also have a very strong mid-tier, a lot in winter sports equipment, exporting globally. But then we also have hidden champions, and that's what we call them here at Advantage Austria. They're the small to mid-sized companies that are very dominant in their market niche and therefore are very competitive on the global stage when exporting. And I point out a few names here of companies we've been in contact with. K-Noah and San Siro, they're doing high-performance textiles for jerseys. And Grip Caddy. Grip Caddy is a smaller company that just won the golf pitch challenge by the PGA Tour. They make golf cleaning grips. So definitely a niche, and that's the narrative here. But when we zoom out a little bit and talk about the U.S. sports business landscape compared to Europe, these are some graphs of the top 5 leagues in the U.S. and Europe, and using data from 2022, 2023, we can see just how huge the U.S. sports market is, earning revenues of up to $49 billion. That's over half of what the top European leagues are doing. But where are these revenues being generated? That's very different, and we'll get into that in the panel. In the U.S., you have at least half of these revenues coming from big media deals and broadcasting. While in Europe, clubs are still very control a lot of the rights here, so you have a lot more revenue being generated from ticket sales and sponsorships. So we're going to invite our panelists to the stage now. So please give a round of applause for Max Kaltenhäuser, Charlie Melillo, Martin Castworm, and Bruce Revman. Anywhere you like. Now, so we've assembled a really great panel of 4 sports business experts here with experience working both in Europe and in the US. They represent the full spectrum of sports business, tech and data, brand storytelling, media and streaming, and mega event planning. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Max as our first speaker. So a little intro on Max. Max Kaltenhäuser is Senior Vice President Americas at Sport Tech Solutions, the company behind the Bundesliga's official match data and video assist technology, and a key contributor to the data standards now used by FIFA at the World Cup. Based in New York, Max leads Sport Tech's expansion across North and South America, including its new U.S. entity and data hub in Dallas. With a deep background in sports media, data, and innovation, he's at the forefront of how technology is transforming both the game on the field and the experience off it, working with partners like Major League Soccer, DFB, and FIFA. So Max, first question for you. So Sport Tech is the backbone of the Bundesliga's match data and VAR technology. When you brought that expertise to the MLS, what was the biggest challenge or difference compared to working in Europe?
First of all, can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. First of all, thanks for having me today. Really looking forward to this panel and to the next meetings as well. And it's great to see some European colleagues coming over and digging into the world of sports here in the US. I think there were, so I was, maybe a little bit the background. I was the very first person coming over from Sport Tech Solutions to the US. Sport Tech Solutions is a joint venture from Bundesliga together with another company that is called Deltadre. And Sport Tech Solutions is as Elliot has already mentioned, is the data and officiating technology provider for Bundesliga and now also for MLS. So coming over as the very first person and building up a US entity here in the US was challenging, and I can tell you we have a long list. I have a long list of challenges, experiences, and that I would like to share with you. I think one of the challenges is, well, let's focus on two main categories. One is mentality, the other one is then product-wise. Mentality is the people here, especially in the US, they are very much business-driven. And this means, especially here in New York, the people here work 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week. In Germany, in Europe, especially in Germany, we have a little bit at the moment another attitude. So, and bringing that together was for sure a challenge, because in the very first beginning, I was the only one here trying to balance that out, the different mentalities here. And then we also have local differences here. So I started here in New York because Major League Soccer sits here and we have a big deal with them. At the same time, we founded our office, our operations center in Dallas, Texas. So also there are differences between New York and Texas when it comes to mentality, when it comes to business, when it comes to the values of the people and of the economy there. So this was for sure another challenge. So this was the whole topic, mentality, and then let's talk a little bit about product. In Germany, we tend to over-engineer things. So, we have an idea, then we have a discussion, we involve all stakeholders, we test it, we have a POC, we discuss it, and 2 years later we have a product on the market. Here in the US, the pressure is very much higher. So the time to market has to be shorter, and this was something that was also a learning for us. As a German, as an European company coming over to the States, that we have to change a little bit our way of thinking and our logic when it comes to product development and time to market, for sure.
That's great. Thank you, Max. A second question on that. So people often hear about data and officiating technology in very abstract terms. Can you give a concrete example of how sport tech's work has actually changed the way refs or clubs or fans experience a match?
Yeah, so maybe let's start with data. When I talk or when we talk about data, it's about performance data. So this means all the live statistics you can see on television, in fan applications, on the betting market, or also that are being used by the coaches and by the performance analysts. These data points and these metrics are being captured by us, processed by us, and distributed by us. So this means data-wise, we have, for example, tracking, a camera system installed in all stadiums to capture the positions of the players and of the ball in real time 60 times a second. Why is that so important? It's important to have that data because we fulfill different needs and different target groups. So it was mentioned that we have some people here from the broadcast, from the media ecosystem. So our data is being used by exactly these broadcasters to provide more insights into the game, to identify interesting stories for the fans, to tell them, to have broadcast graphics on screen with these data points. And this is this is a rabbit hole. Let's say when you talk with Apple, for example, about designing new graphics to explain data to US fans, it's different than in Europe, because in Europe we are, especially in Germany, we are a little bit more conservative when it comes to new technologies, when it comes to new data points. And here the people expect that. They expect the fans, they expect technology, they expect data, they expect innovation. And I think this is one of the key things that we reshaped in our ecosystem. So we developed next-gen stats. It's also a big topic in NFL, meaning that we process all the different data sources that we have cloud-based, and we calculate new advanced metrics out of it. Something that is relevant for the fans, like expected goals or expected threat, but something that is also relevant for medical people and coaches and performance analysts. So something like injury prevention. So we can tell the coaches and the medical staff based on the data we are collecting whether a player how likely it is that this player will get injured in the next couple of weeks. So we analyze the movements of the player, and this is a whole rabbit hole that we open up in the past few years. And therefore we changed on the data side the whole, let's say, way of thinking and the whole perception and usage of data. Last point, and then I stop my monologue. It's about officiating. So we are also the official provider from VR and for MLS and Bundesliga in terms of VR and all these video solutions in the background. I don't know how many soccer fans we have here in the room, but especially in Europe, there's a big discussion about VR, how long it takes to make a decision, to make a final call, especially in offside situations. Or the handball topic. What is a handball that should be penalized and what not? And with especially in the era of AI and automation, we are here at the forefront to make these decisions easier, faster, and more accurate. So, for example, we are able to identify offsides automatically. We are able to identify handball situations automatically, and we can tell the referee this should be a penalty because the body trajectory, the distance to the ball, the shot speed, etc., all these indicators are considered. So according to the laws of the games, this should be a penalty, and we can do that in real time within a second. And I think changing that, helping not only the leagues but also the referees to create a fairer game and a better game in the future. This is one of the milestones that we are working on at the moment.
Excellent. And you've kind of touched on some of these, but want to look forward here and ask, where do you see the next frontier for sports data? It's a tough question, but whether on the tech side with officiating analytics or on the business side with fan products and commercial partnerships or somewhere in between.
Yeah, usually on these panels we talk a lot about our success stories, but I want to talk about something that we fail in. And our sports industry, or sports technology industry, has not done a proper job in the past 10 years. I think we have to combine these two areas. We have to find solutions and technology solutions to solve problems in the sports, but also to make money out of it and to generate revenue streams. In the past 10 years, or in the past, even longer, in the past 20 years, we always had that way of thinking, there's a challenge, so there's an offside situation. It's hard to tell whether it's offside or not. We have to throw technology on it. And this took time, we developed something, and then we solved this challenge. But at the same time, we forgot to think about the monetization potentials. So 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with Apple TV. They are the main broadcast partner for Major League Soccer. And they asked me exactly that question. So it's great that we have all the technology and all the officiating services in place, but how can we make money out of it? And this is something that we have to do a better job. So to come back to your question, I don't have the answer right away, but I think in terms of automation and AI, we have new opportunities in the future. But we always have to consider especially the monetization factor in the future when we throw a technology on the market.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Max. So we will move on to our next panelist, which is Martin Kasper, seated next to me, founder and CEO of Chaka2 Live Marketing. Martin has built a global career at the intersection of business and sports. After completing the FIFA Master and later studying at Harvard Business School, he spent more than 15 years leading Chaka2, developing creative brand activations for some of the world's biggest brands. He's also been our partner on the sports mission for 3 years now, as we've talked about, helping Advantage Austria connect Austrian businesses with the global sports industry. So Martin, first question for you. So you've worked with global brands like Red Bull and Adidas. And when you bring these campaigns to the US, what has to change to connect with American fans compared to Europe? And on the flip side, what are strengths that European agencies bring to sports marketing that the US could learn from?
Well, I saved my welcome because I did it already, but it's great joining these esteemed panelists here. That's a real pleasure for me. And thank you, Max, for those great insights in terms of technology. I think we have heard a lot from Max's explanation around the cultural topic, and I think this is definitely something that we have experienced in the last 3 to 4 years, where we have delved into the US market with our agency and helping not only European brands coming to the US, but also US companies coming to Europe, because essentially we started the business here with this idea of bringing Red Bull, Adidas, Puma, the two German or Austrian brands into the market. And what happened was the flip side, essentially. So American companies approached us saying, listen, couldn't you help us going into the European market? Because for us, it's so difficult to really approach the customers in Europe, where you have different languages, different cultures, different countries, different currencies even, and a lot of different mentality. Because from somebody from the US who's not familiar with Europe, it might seem that somebody from Italy is the same person like somebody from Scandinavia, but it's totally different in terms of culture, in terms of mentality, etc., etc. So these are the things we definitely see, vice versa, on both ends of the aisle. So I think it's very important when you hire, when you do HR, when you set up your team in those different markets, that you consider those factors like the human capital, because I think it's very important to understand the audience you're selling to and the audience you're talking to. And this doesn't only matter in terms of sport, it matters in anything you're trying to sell. And we are in the service providing industry with our team. So I think this is really the crucial factor in terms of understanding who you cater to, because I do believe that this was for us one of the key metrics and one of the key aspects in how to be successful in the US. And then of course also you have distances. I think this is something you shouldn't underestimate, especially as a young startup, as a young company coming into the US market. It's a different ballgame. And something that I have realized also in the past years is they always want to have either the president, the director, or the CEO coming into the market, and not somebody who is like a sales representative. So this helped us a lot in the past, understanding that the C-level needs to be on ground. And that you need to have people and stuff here in our case in Los Angeles. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. And in live sports marketing and activations, how do you really measure success? Is it impressions, engagement, or something else?
I mean, for us, from the service providing industry, it's a lot of things. So it really depends on which industry you're tapping into. I mean, I'm sure we will hear from FIFA afterwards, and what we heard here in terms of eyeballs, in terms of how many people are really joining subscriptions and all those different commercial models that are around. I think it really depends on what is your metric from your field. And for us, I think it's very crucial and important to see that in the end in the dollars, in the euros, because then we know it has also been a successful campaign commercially and financially. And that's also something I think we as Europeans have to learn when we want to be successful here. It's bigger, better, and bolder. And I think you only need to be able to sell yourself and talk about yourself more. Whereas in Austria, or especially in the German-speaking areas, we tend to be more reserved. And it seems to be like that you brag about something in our culture, but here it's pretty normal to talk about yourself. So I think it's important to do that when you're here.
Yep. And talking about kind of building your own image, you've completed both FIFA Masters and studied at Harvard Business School, as we mentioned. How would you say these networks have shaped your career, and what perspectives did you gain from working with such an international cohort?
I mean, I met Charlie at one of those programs. Charlie and I studied in Boston. So no, I think this was always, I don't want to say like a game plan, because we talk here about sports, but it was always some sort of the idea to really not only get the academic knowledge from those programs, which are very esteemed and obviously very high seen with the FIFA Master and with Harvard Business School, but I think also the network, what you pointed out, is crucial and important. Not only being part of the Harvard Club New York or the Harvard Club in Vienna or in Munich, I think these are great connections, meaningful connections that last a lifetime throughout the globe. And I think these are really true friendships that are, forged and within going through business together and also on the private end. So I do believe it's on the one hand the academic insights that you get, obviously understanding the market needs, and getting the metrics and cultural aspects. And on the other hand, it's of course a network. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. And we'll stay with the transatlantic theme. Martin and our next panelist, Charlie Melillo, actually studied together at Harvard Business School, as you mentioned. But we now shift the focus more towards the U.S. sports market and the local expertise here. So Charlie is Chief Business Officer of ViewLift, a digital distribution platform serving sports, media, and entertainment clients worldwide. Charlie's career has spanned executive roles at Endeavor and World Racing Group, where he worked with the NFL, NBA, UFC, WWE, ESPN, and Sky. He was instrumental in launching groundbreaking direct-to-consumer services like UFC Fight Pass, Rogers Sportsnet Now, and Univision Now. He now also teaches at NYU's Tisch Institute for Global Sport, where he focuses on technology and digital disruption. So Charlie, you helped build UFC's Fight Pass and other early DTC platforms. What made these launches breakthroughs, and what lessons stick with you today?
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. I'm very excited to be a part of this program. Martin has told me a lot about it, and I think it's a terrific program that I'm very happy to be part of. I think as we look at all those different services and all those different leagues and all those different organizations that I've worked with through the years, each of them had their own reason for launching something new, but they did all have one commonality. And that commonality was owning their own destiny, owning their relationship with the fan, with the viewer. Now, in some cases, some of those sports properties may have been to open up new markets where they didn't have a footprint. They're what would be called a dark market because they didn't have a broadcast deal. They didn't have a stronghold or even a foothold in that territory. In some cases, it was about broadening distribution. So UFC Fight Pass, for example, that was a service and a go-to-market strategy that was about not just growing the fan base in the United States, but building that fan base internationally. And it's difficult to manage a media distribution strategy in the United States, which can be very regional, can be national. But then when you start looking at territories like Europe, where you literally have dozens of countries and dozens of different media distribution avenues, having your own direct-to-consumer service and owning that relationship directly with the fan enables these properties to prove their value, build strongholds in different markets, but most importantly, the fan is theirs. If you look at traditional media distribution, one of the positives of it is the surety of revenue. Everybody always loves to collect a check. But on the flip side of that, that customer, that fan, that viewer belongs to the distribution partner. So if a sports property has licensed its content to a network, to some third party, it's not necessarily their fan. They're getting limited data, they're getting limited information, and they have limited opportunities to further monetize that relationship. When they own that direct-to-consumer avenue, they own that fan relationship, and they have the ability to build a stronger engagement with them. That might be through selling tickets, merchandise, or doing what I call creating Tuesday afternoon engagement. Everybody knows when the game is on. Everybody knows when the live match is being played. But there's a lot of times during the week that fan may have some downtime. They may have some time in between meetings. Maybe they're sitting on a train on the way home. It's a Tuesday afternoon and they're looking for something to do. And if they want to watch that content, you want to provide the avenue to them to do that.
And if you were advising a major national league in Europe, what's the smartest way to approach media rights and digital platforms in the U.S.?
I think what I would recommend would be not to just sign a deal, take a license fee, and hand off their content. I think it would be very important to maintain a diversified distribution strategy. Now, that will mean having distribution partners in territory. One of the nice things about having those distribution partners is they often have ready-made audiences, so you do have the exposure. You have the surety of revenue. Social is an incredible strategy. You have to have, if you want the young audience, if you want to develop that young audience, you want to engage that young audience, you have to have a social first strategy as well. But ultimately, you have to have your own owned and operated destination. Fans ultimately become loyal through engagement. And if you're only providing means for them to engage via third parties, you're losing an opportunity to create long-term engagement and loyalty. So I would say it's a multi-pronged strategy of broad spectrum distribution through partners, a social strategy particularly aimed at a younger audience, as well as an owned and operated destination that gives fans the opportunity to engage directly with brands.
And at ViewLift, you're working with leagues and media properties on distribution and fan engagement. How does this model reflect where the industry might be headed?
Well, particularly from a U.S. perspective, we have seen a tremendous shift over the last 10 or 15 years from traditional linear broadcast arrangements and distribution deals to a digital-first strategy. In fact, it's the reason I got into the digital media space was I saw that shift, and prior to working in digital media, I worked in finance, and I was working with companies that were raising money to do exactly this sort of thing. So I found it very interesting, became exposed to it, saw the shift beginning probably about 10 or 15 years ago. So as we see things evolve here in the States, we are definitely seeing that shift away from that distribution model. And I would only have to point to ESPN, for example, which has been a stalwart of traditional linear distribution in the United States. They were the single largest revenue generator for what we would call cable companies here in the States, your Time Warners, your Optimums, your Spectrums. They were paying ESPN upwards of $11, sometimes even more than that, per household that were subscribing to them. And for years and years and years, ESPN wanted nothing to do with the direct-to-consumer market because of how steady their cash flow was through traditional distribution here in the States. I worked with ESPN on a service called ESPN Player that was in Europe. It was targeting American expats throughout Europe that were interested predominantly in NCAA sports and other ESPN-owned and distributed properties. And it really helped to prove that business model. Then as we saw the shift here in the States, and we saw that these traditional linear deals simply aren't worth what they used to be, the fact that we're seeing a property like ESPN or the NFL or the NBA, some of the most valuable brands and content in, frankly, not just the United States but the world, if they're going direct to consumer, to me that clearly demonstrates where the industry is shifting. And every major international sports brand that's operating here in the States has a direct-to-consumer property or intention in some form or fashion. For some, it might be promotional-based. It might be free content, replays, highlights, and it's targeted towards promotion. Others, it could be very premium, and it has live matches and live content that fans will pay a price for, or somewhere in between. And one of the things that I've had the good fortune of doing is working with brands to develop those go-to-market strategies. And I've had a lot of fun doing it and helped build a lot of those here in the States and abroad.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie, for your input. So we've covered tech and data activations, marketing, and now media. And all of these really converge when we look at the mega events coming up in the U.S. And there's none bigger than the FIFA World Cup next year. So our final panelist, Bruce Revman, is the co-host city manager for the FIFA World Cup 2026, New York, New Jersey. Bruce has spent his career in major sports and entertainment organizations from the NHL and Madison Square Garden to NASCAR and the New York City Marathon. And now he's helping lead preparations for the world's biggest sporting event right here in our own backyard. So, Bruce, first off, what does a co-host city manager actually do? Can you give us a quick sense of your role and what you're focused on right now?
It changes every day. By the way, thank you for the invite. And I'm learning so much just by being up here. I'd rather just listen. It's evolved. I was the first employee for the host committee. I started this journey in 2019 when I had less gray hair, a lot taller, and looked a lot more alert. So it's evolved. And it's evolved to the sense where when you're a staff of really less than 3 or 4, you're talking about the possibilities, what you think will happen, your vision. As you evolve and the years go by, you add subject matter experts. We have 4 pillars at the host committee: security, mobility, transportation, fan journey, and legacy. I really think the last 2, nothing happens unless you have a secure event and you have people that can get around from point A to point B. If you live in the New York, New Jersey area, you've ever been to MetLife, it's not always an easy journey. So we spend a lot of time and a lot of money gaming out all the different scenarios from wherever you will be in the region. So originally it was really on the fundamentals on those 4 pillars. I will say in the last year and a half, my job has largely been involved more on the political side of things. Very interesting. I don't know if anybody saw a picture yesterday of all the leaders that were in Egypt. And on the very, very far right, did you see who was there? Gianni Infantino. And I asked myself, when I saw that, it caught me off guard, actually. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, and I knew this already, but the World Cup is seen as an event much bigger than football. And we're okay with that, especially in New York, New Jersey. We're used to world events that when they come here, they're much larger than sport. I mean, we have United Nations here. We have events that are the biggest in what they do, the U.S. Open, the marathon. We just had the Ryder Cup a couple weeks ago. But I would say because of the nature of this time and what the World Cup is trying to deliver and the world we live in politics, my role, and I have a co-host manager from New Jersey. We also have a CEO. We spend a lot of time on political matters, making sure that at the end of the day, it's about the game. It's about what the game can do for us as a region. We have, not unlike Atlanta, we have 8 games, but we also have the finals. The biggest game on the biggest stage. That has changed the dynamics and the DNA of what we're doing here because it is the world's biggest game on the world's biggest stage. So my role has evolved, changes every day. But now we spend a lot of time trying to understand the political landscape so that it does not negatively impact what we're trying to do and make everybody feel so proud about hosting these games in this region.
Thank you, Bruce. And 2026 is a milestone year, not just for football, but it's also America's 250th anniversary. How are these two celebrations coming together in your planning for New York and New Jersey?
We work very closely with Sailforth 250, which is the tall ship celebration that will be coming into the harbor. And in addition to that, we also have Fleet Week, which is usually a big week here in New York City. And we are really trying to make sure that we're not taking away from the other's voice. In fact, all of our fan engagement will likely close down on July 4th for the tall ships to come into the harbor. And the fireworks that are going on, we will be here in the market for 39 days. We are okay allowing the country to get its acknowledgement and the ships to come in and Fleet Week to happen. The other thing is resources, too. I mean, the city has only so many NYPD, and we've got to be mindful of what it takes to secure these huge events in and of themselves, even if the World Cup was not here. So really since 2020, right when the pandemic started, we would have monthly meetings with Sailforth 250. At the time, we did not know if Fleet Week was going to be moved back to July 4th. But we have to be working very closely, and they are with us as well, to make sure that we're coordinated on not just the matters that are important to the city's safety and security, but also let the tall ships come in. They're magnificent. They're from 78 countries, I believe. We don't need to compete against that.
And hard question for you here. What's been the toughest part of getting ready for 2026? And what's the part you're most looking forward to when the tournament finally kicks off?
I think right now, for me, it's personally, is to make sure that everybody understands the facts of what's going on and what we can do. We're the host committee. We're not FIFA. In essence, is our partner, but we do not work for FIFA. So when we get inundated on social media, something that happens around tickets, I wish we could do more with tickets, but we don't control tickets. So it's really making sure people understand what our role is, where our priorities are, and making sure that what are the priorities are clearly articulated and what we're focusing on, those 4 pillars. As to what do I look forward to on July 20th is about a month on an island with no Wi-Fi. That's what I look forward to, for sure. That's not a lie.
Thank you, Bruce. Since we're firmly on this World Cup topic now, I'd like to keep it going and open up the discussion for the whole panel. So one question I'll pose is, with Austria's in contention now to qualify for its first World Cup since 1998. So how might that opportunity translate into momentum for Austrian companies and the broader sports industries? Any takers?
Probably I have to take that. I don't know how much. I mean, anybody else can jump in here too. I think it's a huge opportunity for Austria. I think we have 1 month to go. We have 2 more games to play against Cyprus and against Bosnia. And I think if we won out of the 2 or 4 points out of those 2 games, then I think we're qualified for the first time. And I think commercially it's a huge opportunity. I think not only from a business perspective, because a lot of Austrians hopefully are then traveling to the US and seeing this beautiful country and getting to experience the culture, the people, the food, the this and that. So I think this is definitely something where we see a lasting impact. And on the other hand, I think it's great for Austria to be on the sporting landscape again in terms of soccer, and I hope this stays, because the World Cup, I think, is not scaling down again to 32 teams. It will remain with 48 teams, and as long as we stick to 48, I think the chances for us are pretty high that we qualify, also then for Spain, Portugal and Morocco.
Yeah, please. If I could add to that, I think the United States has a certain uniqueness as a destination, but also as a source. And that is, if you look at all the people in the room that are from Europe, moving from one country to another is very commonplace in Europe. In the States, not as much. And I think it's something like 3/4 of the people who live here have never left the United States, and that includes going to Canada and Mexico. So in many instances, something like the World Cup will be the greatest singular exposure to international culture that these people in the United States will have. One of the other aspects of, and it's sort of ironic because this is almost the opposite of that, is there is a connection with historical lineage here in the States, in that our country is only 250 years old, and I know it sounds like a lot here in the States, but I know by European standards, that's a very short period of time. We're not even teenagers by European standards. So a lot of our people here still have connections to family histories back home. So I think there's a couple of different opportunities that the World Cup's going to create for the U.S. to be a resource. And that is, it will expose people in the United States to other cultures that they weren't aware of, they weren't familiar with, may not have been thinking about. I think there's an opportunity for tourism. So as these countries develop their own stories and the content gets created and the stories of these games are being told, and the U.S. learns of some of these international rivalries that exist in Europe that go back generations that are entirely new to us. You see what's happening with the Premier League now in the United States. People are developing fandoms over the matches that they get exposure to. And if you ask why are you an Arsenal fan? Why are you a Bayern fan? It was the first team that I saw. So I think there's an opportunity for that to happen. And in addition, here in the States, we hear a lot about London. We hear a lot about Paris. There's a lot of other wonderful places in Europe, Vienna being one of them. And I think there's an opportunity for cultural exposure that could lead to tourism, that could lead to commerce, could lead to fandom. So I think there's a great opportunity for America to become a resource, a revenue resource for a lot of countries in Europe.
I also think, so I think we already touched a couple of points also in the introduction of this event today. Let's be honest, we have some challenges also from an European standpoint when it comes to the economy right now. Things are changing at the moment, especially when it comes to the relationship with the US. I think the FIFA World Cup will be one of these very rare key milestone events where everyone comes together. It will unite the people from all over the world. It will bring together all the people from a political environment, from an economy environment, especially here in the US and especially here in New York. New York is the capital of business, and I think events like these, to build up your network and to exchange, is the best you can do at this stage. And I think this is the main core component of sports, and also from a FIFA World Cup perspective, is that it brings emotions to these connections, let's say. Sports is connected with emotions, with positive emotions. And if you can associate your brand, your company with these emotions and with these network opportunities here, I think that's a very rare opportunity that you will get in the next couple of years, to be honest.
And we've definitely touched a few of these, and Martin mentioned that there are 48 teams this year. It's expanded. There's 16 host cities and 3 countries involved for the first time. And from your individual focus areas or just in general, what do you think will make this World Cup stand out compared to previous editions? It's a loaded question.
I'll start. I think just first of all, the fact that you just said that, 3 countries, 48 nations. I work very closely with the other 10 host cities in the United States. Great folks in Atlanta, by the way. Great folks. And every city is so unique in terms of how they are approaching their matches, their games. If I were a football fan and I could take this summer off, I would just travel up and down the coast, and we hope people do that. Hopefully they'll anchor in New York or New Jersey, go to Boston, go to Toronto, go to Atlanta, because there's so much football and it's so diverse. It really will be an amazing experience. I've had the chance to really visit almost every host city in Mexico and in Canada, and part of me wishes I were not working, because I would love to go to all the markets hosting games. One thing, and this is so true in New York, New Jersey, we really leaned into the diversity of our region. So regardless of the matches who are playing in the stadium, it will sell out because they're here. They have that fan base already here. And candidly, I think that's why we won the finals, is because at the end of the day, this region is an example of what diversity should be as it relates to sport. But I think the 3 nations, knowing what I know, are all going to put on magnificent displays of events, and they're all leaning into to the city, the heritage, the people, in a way that, as I said, I really wish I could see them all while the matches are going on. And I tell people, if you have a chance, if you're in New York, New Jersey, great, we want you, but go to other markets too, because you need to see how other cities are hosting, because you'll really get a great sense of what, certainly in the USA, what we're all about.
I think one of the unique opportunities it's going to create is the ability to create a new market or add to the market for football in general. And what I mean by that is, if you look at where football is positioned in the global hierarchy of sport, unquestionably it's at the top, but certainly top 3 in terms of popularity in every major country in the world, with the exception of the United States. And I think, frankly, the United States is probably the last country where you've got more than 300 million people, the majority of which are a completely untapped market for the sport of football. MLS has done phenomenal things and has tremendous success in the last 25 or 30 years. But they're still, depending upon the measure you use, somewhere between 5 and 10 in terms of the sport hierarchy here in the United States, whether you do TV revenues, attendance, or whatever metric you use. And I think that having the World Cup here spread across not just the entirety of the United States, which is a very fertile ground and largely still a new market for the sport of football, adding in Mexico and Canada, where, I mean, well, frankly, it's more popular, but still not necessarily. You look at Canada, hockey still runs Canada. I think it's going to create a tremendous opportunity for football-related organizations, for teams, and all of the businesses around it that support the sport, the brands, the sponsors, the activation partners, hospitality, and I think it's going to create a tremendous amount of new revenue for the sport and potentially help to propel the next phase of growth for the sport of football.
Just to piggyback on that idea and to follow up here, we had our FIFA Master 25-year anniversary conference last month in Zurich, where Gianni was also speaking in terms of what is the difference between Qatar, the last World Cup, and now coming to, let's say, US, Mexico, and Canada. And he made one interesting example that back then in Canada, which is back then in Qatar, which is like the size of Manhattan times, I don't know, 10. So very, very small. They only had one ticketing office, one administration office, like one building for all the employees. Like, it was very centralized. We talked about that before the panel, that you were able in Qatar to see 3 games in one day. If you left in the 85th minute, you could take the metro to the next game, and in a game day you see 3 games in a day. So I think just the sheer complexity that this new World Cup is bringing now is frightening, but I think FIFA and especially all the people on the ground have done an amazing job in the last 5 to 10 years to get the US, Canada, and Mexico prepared for that. And I think this is where everybody's super excited about to experience this next year for 1 month, no matter where you are in which host city. And I think this is really the nice thing about that. And when you look back into the 90s, when the last World Cup was here and the MLS was born, this really was back then already the biggest commercial success for a World Cup in the history of the World Cup. So I think we can only imagine now being so big in 3 countries, essentially in 1 continent, with 48 teams, with as many matches as we have never seen, with as many minutes of game time we can sell. This will blow up like we've never seen before. This is really what we are thinking about.
And as far as I know, you guys are going to meet with Chris Schlosser at the MLS office, and he will tell you exactly that story. So Chris is the perfect contact person to share some insights here, what MLS is planning to do after the World Cup, and which vision they have and which plans. So he will not agree with you that MLS is only between 5th and 10 in the ranking, but
Chris is a great guy. I've known him for a few years. We've had that debate a few times. It all depends on the measure.
Yeah.
Is it attendance? Is it media rights? I mean, we'll have the debate.
It's just for the recording, you know.
Thank you all. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience as we have some time.
Yeah, I have a question. Who is broadcasting the World Cup in the US? Is there one
In the US?
In the US. In the States here.
Oh,
Who's broadcasting?
Fox and Telemundo.
Fox, so 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fox will do the English broadcast, and Telemundo will do the Spanish language broadcast.
Okay. And how much did they pay for that?
A lot. I think it was a lot times 2, as a matter of fact. I don't recall the number offhand, but I know the bidding was quite substantial.
Yeah. Can imagine. And probably a bit view to the future from you, Charlie, probably. What do you think will be the in terms of broadcasting sports events, big premier content? Who will be the big guys? Is it more the old networks, or is it YouTube, Apple, TikTok?
I don't know that we're ever going to have one here in the States anyway, speaking very specifically about the United States. I don't know that we'll ever have one that is just head and shoulders above the rest. I think in some form or fashion, you will always have licensed distribution here in the States. It may look a little different. I don't think the Foxes of the world and the NBC Sports and Versant and all of these media properties, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think those businesses will continue. They'll remain very healthy, and they will work with major sports properties to distribute content. But I also think the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world are telling us that they are clearly here to stake their claim. And frankly, I think there's enough to go around. So I sort of go back to what I said earlier, where you have to have a multi-pronged strategy, because each of these different partners, properties, destinations, they all have an audience, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. The fans that engage with content on YouTube are looking for a specific type of content. The fans that engage on Instagram or Twitter, X, they're looking for a specific type of content. Same thing applies for the Netflixes, Amazons, the Foxes, the Versants of the world. Is it long form? Is it short form? We have seen tremendous increases in consumption of short form content. So especially among the younger generation, where they may be less likely to sit and watch a 2.5 hour, 3 hour match, but their eyes will be glued to the screen for 10 minutes of highlights. So they're going to consume that content a little differently than they would, say, you or I, which might be a little more akin to, I've put the match in my diary, and I know Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I'm watching that match, and I want to sit back on the couch and watch it on the big screen. So I think it comes down to, what is the media strategy? Who do you want to reach, and how many of them do you want to reach? So that's a really long-winded way of saying I don't think there's going to be a singular clear winner. I think it will continue to be a grouping of organizations in various verticals that will be above the others.
So the best chances for the content owner, the brands, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I think content still is key. And if you look at the United States in particular, live sport is still the last appointment viewing. And the value of live sports, we have only seen it go up and go up. And every time there's a rights cycle, all we hear is, oh, is the bubble finally going to burst? And, you know, the NFL, what was it, 12, 18 months ago, $110, $115 billion. Every time they get told the rates aren't going to go higher, they say, well, let me show you. I think that's going to continue to happen. And frankly, as organizations that want to distribute content get priced out of the NFL, the NBA, MLB, NHL, as the value of those rights become greater, it opens up avenues of opportunities for sports that may not have had exposure to the United States before. Look at F1, MLS. All of these different properties have some of the biggest deals they've ever had in the United States, certainly in my lifetime, and I think that's going to continue.
Thank you very much.
Stefan, please. Question for Bruce. There's a lot of unique things about World Cup next year, but I think something that's really unique from the planning and execution side is that unlike events like Masters or US Open or Super Bowl that are really just that city hosting, this is across the board in 3 different countries. And so I think you have, for one of the first times in the US, really a lot of conversations between different cities, between different host committees. And so I'm curious, just from your experience now, working on this for New York, your conversations with other cities, what have you kind of taken from those conversations, best practices, challenges, and just seeing the diversity of ways that these different cities are approaching an event of this size?
Really, since the cities, so in 2022, the cities got designated host city. So it's 3 years. Probably, well, after we all got designated, like 2 days later, they summoned all the winning cities to New York. Good news is we were already here. We didn't have to do anything. That was also Canada, Mexico. So really, since June of 2022, we have met with, and we speak every 2 weeks, and it probably will get a little bit, the cadence will get even more regular with all the host cities. We have so many calls with the host cities in different verticals. We have the chief revenue officers talk every 2 weeks. FanFest managers talk every 2 weeks. The CEOs talk every 2 weeks. And then we've also organized, we hired a firm to help us lobby D.C. over the last 3.5 years. So we would go to D.C. together. So it's been wonderful, and I mean this. The only thing I will really miss when this ends is just the great friendships that we have all formed, because there's a spirit of partnership. We're in it together because this has been hard, but each city kind of has a little bit of a best practice that we all learn from, and we learn how they navigate within their space. Some cities already have sports commissions, like Atlanta, so they know how to do this really well. You've had college football championships, you've had other things. In New York, we don't have a sports commission, or New Jersey. So our host committee was formed specifically for the World Cup. So we've learned a little bit about how they do things, from also foundationally, how do they develop a 501c3 so that we can create a foundation. So it's been very, very helpful. We do talk to Canada and to Mexico, not as frequently. We every 3 months we have a workshop. We just had one in Houston. We'll be back to Miami for our last one in January, I think. So it's been great because we're all on our own, and having this, this sense of, as I said, spirit of partnership has been very therapeutic for all of us as well, that we are all in this together. So it's been great.
Miami in January must be nice.
Miami, we lobby for that. Not much New York lobbying.
I imagine New York wasn't at the top of that list in
No.
January.
No. We just had them up here last week. Everybody was up here in Jersey City. We had our FIFA Fan Fest workshop with all the 16 markets. Our big fan festival is at Liberty State Park, and then we're doing everything in New York City, from Rockefeller Center, U.S. Tennis Center, Brooklyn Bridge Park. So, like a lot of cities are learning from us because we are really obligated to have fan engagement. Other cities are not, and we show them what we're doing, how we're paying for it, and what that works. So that's another best practice that we're able to share.
How open is the market or the culture in the U.S. for innovation, especially that doesn't enhance entertainment, but more the experience?
I would say very high. I would say that there's two main drivers of innovation. One is improving the experience for the fan, whether that is a viewer at home, in person at a venue. How can we get them to engage more with the content? How can we get them through security faster? How can we better facilitate the ordering of food or merchandise at the venue? All of those things. There's absolutely a strong desire for innovation there. And as you pointed out before, from a business standpoint, there's certainly appetite for innovation when it comes to driving revenues. In my space in particular, how can we generate greater ARPU, average revenue per user? How do we grow the amount of revenue that each viewer or fan spends in a given year, plus what they generate? Now, that could be from purchasing a subscription to view content, purchasing merchandise online, purchasing tickets to an event, or how do we create more optimized advertising delivery so that when that viewer is watching something, even though they're not reaching into their pocket per se, the advertising that we're delivering is so tailored and so specific and optimized to such a degree that it generates the highest value possible. And that's an area where we have focused a great deal and have had a lot of success. So I would say that the appetite for innovation from both a fan experience and a revenue standpoint, both very high.
I think I fully agree, and I would even go a little bit further when it comes to appetite. I think it's the expectation. So I can talk now from a fan perspective. So the fans that are watching MLS, these fans are used to NBA, NHL, NFL, and UFC and all the other big sports here. They expect cool data. They expect cool fan applications. They expect that. And for MLS, I think there is still a way to go. They are on the right path, but this is something that we also learned. The expectation. Innovation is the expectation here of the fans and of the people living here in the US. I think that's also a little bit of difference to Europe.
And I would say from an innovation perspective, that's an area where MLS has excelled for a very long time. They've been very tech first and very focused on innovation for many years.
I think this was their advantage because they are still a very young league and they were grown as a digital league, let's say. And I think this was for sure helpful for their development.
Yeah, Chris Schlosser and the team at MLS have done a tremendous job leading innovation.
Maybe I can add something. Like you were talking about business, but how about the experience that doesn't bring necessarily business? Like audio description, for example, is something, or translation that doesn't bring business, but it creates a better experience. It's more modern if you do it through smartphones than old analog devices. So is there an open market for that in the US, or is it?
Absolutely, but I would argue it does bring more business because if you are reducing the friction that a viewer has to the content, you by nature are creating more business. So if you have a fan that perhaps they don't speak English or understand English well enough to keep up with the commentary for the sport that they're watching, if their native language is German or Spanish or Chinese, by offering that experience in a language they're more comfortable with, they're more likely to engage. That engagement leads to business. So I would say every innovation I've seen falls into two categories, but ultimately pursue the same outcome. You're either improving the fan experience or you're generating revenue. If you're improving the fan experience, you are indirectly creating revenue because you're creating higher quality engagement or more engagement.
It just sounds like you are open up new ways to make the sport and the product more accessible with your product. And I think this is exactly what you said. It's an indirect effect when it comes to the business and the revenue. So I think you are on the right way.
Any further questions? I'll give one to kind of round us out. I mean, you all have worked on both sides of the Atlantic, in Europe and in the U.S. We have a lot of Austrian companies on the broadcast and here as well, looking to do business here in the U.S. market involving sports. What would be the one single most important piece of advice that you would offer them?
I start from the Austrian perspective. I think everybody watching here is, just do it. It's very simple. It's a phrase that comes from sport, from Nike, obviously. I think just, Austrians tend to be very, not close-minded, but like shy of, can I even do that? And then not enough self-confident. And I think just go, and the market is here. And Americans are very welcoming if you approach them the right way. And I think if you're innovative, if you're a doer, if you're an entrepreneur, just come here and experience really the pleasure of this country. So just do it.
I'll piggyback that a little bit. I've had a lot of startups reach out to us that I've actually networked with FIFA, and they're tiny companies, but they're solving some problems. I don't know where that's going to go, but I think I would say to anybody, don't be scared to reach out. FIFA is the largest, sports governing body. Even if you don't get that business, what do you learn along the way? What do you learn? And a lot of these companies have been surprised that I have taken the liberty to say, hey, listen, I'm from New York. I'm the host city, one of the co-host city managers. I'd be glad to introduce you to FIFA because I believe there may be something there. Don't be afraid. If you're afraid, then you got to just do it.
Yeah, I think to echo sort of, it's been my experience that when I'm working with European-based organizations that are looking to either expand in the United States or bring our technology to Europe to create distribution, indecision often becomes the enemy. And I believe there's such a focus on making the right decision that a decision doesn't get made, which in effect is the wrong decision. And I always advise organizations, whether it's a league, a brand, a media company, very few decisions are final and irreversible. And I understand why we would really take a long time to make a careful decision about something that's irreversible and unchangeable. But if we go to market down this path and we find out that, well, maybe it's not having quite the success that we thought it would, we could pivot, we could adjust. But one thing we can't do is expect things to be successful if we haven't made the decision to enter the market.
My piece of advice is from my personal experience here. Be self-confident. So when I started this journey here, I was starting every presentation, every pitch, every meeting with, 95% of our service was working perfectly fine, but then there were these 5%, and we really have to tackle this issue, and this was an issue, this was a problem. No, turn it around. The storytelling is you've done an amazing job. You have a solution that makes the sports more accessible. You have something to offer. So be self-confident and at the same time explain how you are going to solve these small issues and these percentages on the way. And this is something I think from an European or German standpoint, it's always like we are focused on the problems, but we forget about what we've achieved. And this is, I think, just a change in the way of thinking and the way of storytelling that we have to adapt.
I think that's a really perfect way to close. So let's give a round of applause for our panelists.